Hey everyone, it's Sandy and today I'm doing my May wrap-up. I've had a really busy month this May and so I didn't read that many books, but I did read 4 books and 1 novella, which I think is a pretty good number for the month that I've had. Let's just get started with the first book that I read, and that book is Ashes to Ashes by Siobhan Vivian and Jenny Han. This is the 3rd book in the Burn for Burn trilogy. I can't really say much about this book since it is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy, but I did really enjoy it. This book got really intense and I loved how intense it was. I stayed up really late at night just to finish it. The ending was a bit rushed, especially that last chapter. Things didn't necessarily end the way I wanted it to, but I'm still pretty satisfied with how it ended up, and I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is one of my favorites that I've read this month, and it's going to be one of my favorites this year, and that book is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I wasn't planning on picking this book up this month, but since the author was coming to a local bookshop, I decided to buy it, start reading it so I can meet the author and get this book signed, and I'm really glad that I did because I really loved it. This book was really amazing. There is a bit of a love square type of thing in this book, and don't worry about it because the romance takes a backseat in this book. It's not the main focus. The main focus is on the plot, which I loved. There wasn't much world building in this book, but I loved how the writing wasn't confusing when things are being explained, because usually when it comes to fantasy type books, I get really confused at times, and that's why I don't really read fantasy books that often, because just things get really confusing, and this one I wasn't confused at all. The plot and characters were wonderful. I love the trials aspect of this book because they were so intense, especially that 3rd one. By the way, if you read this book, how do you pronounce the names of the characters? Because when I was reading it, I pronounced it as Leah and Elias, but from what I've heard, it's actually pronounced Laya and Elias. Going back to the characters, I really love the friendship between Helene and Elias. Although they did irritate me at times because of how often they got mad at each other, I do think that they go really well together and they have a really nice dynamic. I also love reading from Laya's experience as a slave and seeing how things played out as she's trying to get information. The book did start off slow, but I love the pacing of it because it creates suspense. I love the dual POV. Pretty much every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and it kept me on the edge of my seat. And overall, I really love this book. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. And I'm really glad that there's going to be a sequel for this because it was originally going to be a standalone, but there is going to be a sequel now, and I'm very happy for that. The next book that I read is Unleashed by Sophie Jordan. This is the 2nd and last book to the Uninvited duology, and I was a bit disappointed by this book. It's really hard to talk about my thoughts about this book without spoiling it, therefore I will be very vague about my thoughts. I felt like that there was a lot of unnecessary things in this book. Some I didn't mind, like a thing that had to do with romance. And there was this thing that happened at the end that you find out about, and I thought the reasoning behind it was so incredibly stupid. I just couldn't believe that was the reason why this was happening. Thinking about this book, not a lot happened. This book focuses on Davy and what's happening in her new surrounding. But what about what was happening outside of Davy's life? That was something that I really wanted to know. I thought Davy would be the one to create change about the treatment towards carriers of this kill gene. And even though every chapter has a new snippet of things being changed in the outside world, I just felt like it wasn't enough for me. The aftermath of the changes just appeared like people just easily adapted to it with no struggles or rebellion whatsoever. And even though there is a tiny mention of people trying to get used to it, I just feel like it just didn't feel believable, and that was my main problem. So overall, this book was a bit of a letdown, and honestly I feel like this duology could have been just one single standalone book. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Winner's Crime by Marie Rakowski. This is the 2nd book in the Winner's Curse trilogy. I don't have a copy of this book because I checked it out from my school's library and it was due a couple days ago, so I returned it. I didn't enjoy this book as much as I did with the 1st book, and I feel like my main reason why is that it's been a while since I read the 1st book. I've noticed that I tend to like sequels less than the 1st book because it's usually been a couple months after I've read the 1st book before I pick up the sequel, or I wait a year before the sequel comes out, and I just lose that my love / connection to that book. The characters really frustrated me in this book, however I did really enjoy what was going on, and I definitely will be continuing this trilogy because if you read it, you know. I give this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the last thing that I've read this month is a novella, and that novella is Finding Cinderella by Colleen Hoover. Finding Cinderella is a novella for hopeless, and it follows Daniel, who is Holder's best friend, and Six, who is Sky's best friend. This book was exactly what I needed. It was short, cute, and emotional, and I loved it. I gave this novella a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know why I didn't just give it a 5 stars, but I feel like, I don't know, it's really hard to rate novellas for me. If you've read Hopeless and you haven't read Finding Cinderella yet, I highly suggest that you read it because it's a really cute and emotional read, and I think you will really love it. Even if you haven't read Hopeless yet, you can still read Finding Cinderella. There really isn't anything in that book that would spoil Hopeless for you. Finding Cinderella is a free ebook, so you can get it for free on iBooks or Kindle. So if you want to check it out, I highly suggest it. And yeah, enjoy the free novella. That is it for my May wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!